right, we're recording. Here we go. Charles Freyer, Teresa Hardy.
Here.
And we, as Jennifer mentioned, we heard from Matt Herman that he was going to be late. Leah?
Here.
Michelle?
Here.
Mike?
Present.
Mario? Eduardo?
Here.
Daria?
Daria, I'm here.
Daria, I'm so sorry. I think I probably mispronounced it this entire time.
It's quite all right.
You're so kind. Carson? And Ken?
Here.
Awesome.
Thank you. And we had only heard from one, correct? You said Matt? Okay.
Matt was the one who reached out.
I think in the past we'd determined to make that decision at the end of the meeting and whether or not we were allowing the excusals. So with that said, we will move on. I will like to read the preamble for tonight's remote meeting. The role of the Transportation Mobility Commission is to review and analyze transportation projects, policy changes, program development, and other transportation matters affecting the right-of-way, the public right-of-way. We follow a public process, including voting on action items during which the public has an opportunity to provide additional perspectives and information. In legislative matters, the role of the commission is advisory. The Planning Commission may hold separate meetings to consider our recommendations and provide their own, and City Council may also hold separate meetings to consider our recommendation and make final determinations. The Transportation and Mobility Commission will conduct a meeting tonight and take public comments during designated times. Any written testimony received prior to 4 p.m. tonight will be read into the record or introduced into the record by staff. Callers who have pre-registered by 4 p.m. on the Transportation and Mobility Commission survey page will be called upon to address the Transportation and Mobility Commission. When you are called, we will promote you to a panelist so members can see and hear you as you provide comments. If you are providing the formal recommendation of a neighborhood association or other group, please tell us when the association voted on the matter, as well as how many people were for and how many people were against said matter. Please keep remarks brief and to the point. Remarks should be directed to the Transportation and Mobility Commission as a body, not the audience or staff. Please do not repeat comments that have already been provided in print or verbally. Please show respect for the people commenting tonight, whether or not you agree with their comments. With that being said, did we have any pre-registered public communication expected tonight, Jan?
Yeah, so our deadline, you just read a 4 o'clock, but our deadline is 2 o'clock. And so I did not receive any, and that shows that both on the TMC website as well as the agenda. So I did not see that. I did not receive anything by 2 p.m. today. You're muted.
I apologize for that. I will get that preamble corrected on my side. With that said, then I will. We won't be expecting any public comments. We do have the agenda set out till about 7 p.m. tonight. That may be a little bit generous on behalf of what we're expecting to come. With that said, I'd like to move to the adoption of the March minutes. They were provided earlier in this week or earlier to all of the commission members. Have everyone had an opportunity to review those? Has anyone not had an opportunity to review those? Then I would like to, anyone care to make a motion to adopt the March 2nd meeting minutes as they are?
Williams, move to adopt.
Anyone wish to second that?
Dana, I'll second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Do we need to take an individual vote, or can we pass those as unanimous? If I hear no, David, may you wish to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. I would just say, just for sake of consistency, while these meetings remain completely remote, it might make more sense just to run through a roll call for each vote. Just for the minutes, it's going to make it easier to know who was there and who voted in assent to that. I know it adds a little wrinkle
Thank
to
you
it,
for
but
that.
I'm sorry, I did
Fully
not
agree.
catch who seconded the motion.
I'm sorry, it's me, Michelle, and I think it's because my last name has changed since I started this commission. So you probably still have me as Michelle McKenzie, but my last name now is Thana.
Okay. Thought there was something different there, Michelle.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take roll, if that's okay, Chair Payne, or take the
Please.
vote. Okay. Commissioner Hardy,
Or this vote, to confirm, this vote is to adopt the March 2nd minutes as is.
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Commissioner Payne,
Yes, please.
Commissioner Ramos,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Yes.
all right. I'm sorry, Michelle, what is your last name again?
It's Thana, Thana.
Okay, Commissioner Thana
Yes.
and Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dan, you're muted. Was that completion?
Yes, that completes it. I'm sorry.
Thank you. We will accept the March minutes then as passed, unanimous. So I believe, well, I got a little bit out of order. It's been a few months. I apologize. A little rusty. So we got a little bit out of order, but we had next on the agenda was for action items, or first on the agenda for action items tonight was a collaboration compact. I believe that this was the completion of our onboarding sessions, and the last time that we had spoke to that, we had discussed putting the onboarding into public record. Was that what I understood? Jennifer, can you speak to that, or was that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Payne. That was my understanding from talking with Kevin, was that there was interest from the commission to formally adopt this. But in an oversight on my part, I didn't realize that the final version of the compact hadn't been sent to all of you. So I just sent that out probably about an hour ago. So if there's interest, we can just make it an informational item and review it tonight. Or if you feel comfortable, we could still move forward with adopting it tonight. It's whatever the commission feels comfortable doing, but it is the final version and it's based on that last onboarding session that you had with Kevin.
I, for one, am
I will unmute.
going for it because it looked very little change from how I last saw it, if at all. So it wasn't really obvious to me that there's any heavy editing, maybe correcting some misspelled words. I don't know. So I'd be okay with adopting it.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like we have a motion to adopt. Anyone wish to second that? No, we have no second.
I'll second the motion to adopt. This is Commissioner Thana.
Thank you. Jan, would you care to take a vote on that, please, for adoption of the onboarding sessions as information?
Hold on a second. I just saw a little chat from Mario that just washed up, and I think he's in the wrong room.
Thank you. I did not see him come in, and it looks like Matt is here as well.
You know, and I have to say, Chairman, this is Commissioner Ruggles. There's just there's one piece under inclusive and equitable. So even though this has the spirit, it's stated in the negative in a way that I find a bit awkward. So if you look under the principles under inclusive and equitable, a transportation system that is equitable and not supporting systemic racism, that it should read a transportation system that is equitable and addresses systemic racism to me, or something that's said in the positive.
I do not have a copy that I can bring up to the screen. Is there anyone that has that available to do so?
Sorry, I've been trying to pull it up, so I apologize.
Or in recognition of the need to address, I mean, something, again, that is more to point and a positive structure.
I think if we're unable to see it or unable for all of us to look at it together, we may not be able to make that decision tonight, or is that, I mean, we can share this for next week?
I would rather, honestly,
Table it for next
I'm
week.
seeing another thing, and it's like the word elements, what does that mean? So yeah, actually, I would, if you want me to make a motion, then I would make a motion that we delay until we all get a chance to peruse this properly, please.
And I second that. I'd like to reread it also before I vote on it.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally understandable. And again, I'm sorry about the oversight.
It's okay.
It hadn't got sent out to you earlier.
It's fine. And we got, all this other time, but did you say next week? Are we meeting next week?
No.
Next month.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay. I was like, wait, what? Okay, great. And then the thing I would just say, Jennifer, is when we do get it, are we doing it in such a way that you're going to, where we can easily make suggestions, or do we want to keep the suggestions for later? I just kind of need to know that because I'm already making one.
Yeah, I think it would be a lot easier. So remember just to send them to me individually. So if you have any comments or edits, send those to me individually, so not to the whole group. And then I can collect those, and then I'll send it out again well before our next meeting. If maybe everybody can look at this maybe over the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
Then I can send that out for one final review before we have it on the agenda for next month's meeting, if that's okay.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then I also wanted to ask, kind of as it relates to the compact, I know it was something that you talked about in that last onboarding session about the formality of addressing each other. Because originally we had kind of set this up as informal, so we were addressing each other by first name instead of like Commissioner Ruggles or Commissioner Jackson. I didn't know if there's interest from the group for keeping that formality, or if you want to go back to more of the informal first name basis. I was just curious and wanted to confirm that with everybody.
What I recall is that we were going to stick with it because
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but this is just what I recall, everybody. So, and the reason was not because it was about, a necessary formality, but instead it has to do with the respect for the position and each other's roles within this. That's what I remember. Not that we can't talk with each other, like if we're saying, hey, Mike, what about this? It's not that it's rigid, but the idea that we're addressing each other according to our positions, it is respect for the process. Does anyone else remember that?
I kind of thought that we had said we were going to do like the introductions and the roll call votes with the commissioner titles and then be more informal throughout the meeting. But I'm not 100% certain on that either.
But that's probably, you know what, that's probably, Michelle, the way that I'm sort of remembering. So it's like, it's okay. Like if I say, oh, Michelle, but I don't know what you mean. It's not like we're being disrespectful. We established us as referring within the structure. And then if we have something between us, we can do that. That is actually how I remember it as well.
And perhaps voting.
And to put my my objective on that, I think as I address people to take the floor, it was also due with the respect of you know, addressing the commissioner in which I was handing the floor to. So sort of a mix between the two, I guess.
That's what I remember.
Okay. Commissioner
Is that
Jackson.
fair, Jennifer?
Yeah, Leah, were you going to comment as well?
Saying I was thinking it was during voting that we wanted to do our last names. Was that right?
Yeah, it kind of sounds like that's what everybody is saying, was for the formality of the process. And then if it's okay, you know, during a discussion or something like that, it's okay to be able to use somebody's first name.
Exactly.
Okay. And then can I ask one more question? Thank you. About meeting times. So I know that we originally started this and it was 4 to 6, and then we were running into kind of bumping up and not having enough time. So we've kind of expanded it to 4 to 6:30 as kind of our regular meeting time. But like tonight's, I thought maybe we would go to 7. And I just wanted to confirm the feedback that I got from staff and from Kevin that were at that last onboarding session is that you would prefer to stay to that 4 to 6:30 time, but you're open to going a little bit longer, you know, for some meetings, but not making that consistently the case for all meetings. So like Planning Commission, they don't have an agenda with the time slot. So if like they had one the other month, which was 5 hours long, which I know we never want to do, but they're there until the work is done.
Correct.
So I just wanted to confirm and make sure that I understood that correctly, that it's okay to maybe go to 7, you know, a couple times for the meetings, because we've got a lot of work coming up in the next 4 to 5 months. So I just wanted to kind of confirm that as well with the group.
That's the way I understood it.
I wasn't, right. I apologize that I wasn't at the last meeting if something has changed, but it was also, that was my understanding as well.
Okay.
I think if we do have a loaded agenda, that we are all more than accommodating to be available until 7 p.m. if needed. But we are, in most cases, happy to stick with the 6:30 as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything, comments to that? Anyone else not available until 7 p.m. for any reason? And I think hopefully tonight, as I mentioned coming into this, it did look like we had a somewhat light agenda, so we may not make it, you know, today. We may not even make it till 6:30. We'll just kind of see how it rolls. With that said, I heard a motion to table this action item until next month. Do we wish to bring that back up and finish that motion?
I think if I'm not mistaken, Chair Payne, Daria moved and Commissioner Hardy seconded it.
Perfect. Yeah, that. So let's take it to vote, please.
All right. Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Commissioner Thana,
Aye.
Commissioner Payne,
Yes, please.
Commissioner Raya. I'm having problems with names tonight, you guys. So sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Ramos,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hardy,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruggles.
Yes.
Thank you. Then it's a unanimous vote. We will table the introduction of the onboarding till next month. So with that said, we're moving ahead quite a ways on our agenda for this evening. Next up for an informational item, we have I'm sorry, I lost your name. Chris, help me out. Where's Chris?
Yeah, Chris Malone.
Chris Malone, thank you. We have a Chris Malone who is going to present to us the Transportation Improvement Program, give us a review of that. He will also be following that up with a review of our transportation grant opportunities. There are a couple booklets that were handed out earlier. It looks like Jan's ready to start sharing those with us. So without further ado, Chris, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. Good evening, commissioners, or good afternoon, I guess. It's a pleasure to virtually meet everyone. My name is Chris Malone, and I am the Finance and Infrastructure Asset Manager for Public Works. I've been working on the Transportation Improvement Program for several years, so I've kind of been selected as the person to talk to folks when we talk about the TIP. Jan, are you able to pull up the presentation?
You're muted, Jan.
I'm so sorry. From my perspective, it looks like I'm sharing. So just.
You are, you just need to, it's like at the very bottom of the PowerPoint, there's like a little symbol.
There you are.
It's like,
I see
yeah,
it.
go over a couple, like one more.
There we go. Is that it?
Yep.
You have
I
it?
think that'll work.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So sorry, guys.
So go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Jen.
Okay. Are we right there? Is that where you want me, Chris?
Yep, that's a good one.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So yeah, I'm going to talk about the Transportation Improvement Program with kind of the idea that maybe some of you haven't had the opportunity to get familiar with it. So I apologize if it's a little too basic for some people, but I think it's good that everyone have kind of a good understanding. And if I do bring up something that you're not understanding, just go ahead and ask a question. I'll answer on the go as we're going along here. And it's about a half an hour presentation, so I'll need a break from talking anyways. But as far as the Transportation Improvement Program, we'll talk about why we created one. And then we'll get into the document in a little more detail with all the specific updates and kind of get everyone familiar with how the document is formatted. And then we'll talk about next steps. Next slide, please, Jen. So why we create the TIP? It's actually required by state law. There is an RCW that says that counties have to adopt a transportation improvement program by a certain date, and cities have to adopt it by the end of June. And the law is a little bit vague. All it really says is that there needs to be a list of projects. And here at the city, we've tried to go above and beyond what the state, what the law requires, and provide more information to the citizens. The document, by having these 6-year plans of these transportation capital projects, having all the agencies share that information with each other allows for coordinated planning, so we know what the agencies around us are working on. Additionally, we're able to share that with our water and sewer utilities, our storm utilities, our pavement management program, maybe even parks or some other departments, so they know what transportation will be working on in the coming years. And for the example of utilities, they can start to prepare to make sure they do their utility upgrades within that street before the project comes. They don't have to tear up a new street. Also, by having projects on our TIP, our 6-year list, many of the state and federal grant agencies require that a project be on an agency's TIP list in order to be eligible for grants. So by having the project on the list, we're able to apply for grants for that project. And then the last bullet here is kind of what I was talking about, that we try to go above and beyond what the law requires. We want to improve our transparency and accountability to the citizens. So we've included like information about our finances, our transportation finances, We include detail sheets that have a lot more information about specific projects. So we try to just go above and beyond and provide that transparency and accountability. Next slide.
I have a quick question. Is this updated annually or less frequently or more frequently?
Yep, it is updated once a year. And like I said, the RCW says it has to be done by the end of June each year. Okay, so as far as the format of our document, it's stayed a pretty similar format for several years. We have an introductory section, and that introductory section includes all the comprehensive plan policies, the financial policies, the strategic goals that kind of dictate how transportation operates here at the city. It includes a letter from the director kind of talking about the highlights for the year. And it also includes general information about what laws require the tip, how you add a project or how you remove a project from the tip, that kind of information. So kind of introduction to the document. After that is a financial section, and it's a historic look at expenses and revenues for transportation, and then also a forecasted look. And so there's tabular forms, and then there's also graphs that are included in that financial section. After the financial section are the actual project lists themselves. After the project list, and by the way, there's 3 different lists in our tip. There's a funded list. Those are projects that have all the funding necessary to take them through the construction phase. There's a partially funded list, which means typically they have money to do the design and the right-of-way phase, but they don't have money to do the construction phase. And then there's an unfunded list, which means no money has been allocated towards that project yet. After the project lists are detailed project sheets, and those project sheets, if citizens are interested in a specific project, they can find the project number on the project list and then look for the corresponding detail sheet. And that detail sheet has a map of the project. It has a description, it has a justification, limits, expenditures, just more detailed information for each project. After the detailed project sheets, we update our arterial map every year. That's not required by law, but it has been our past practice to basically do just cleanup. Usually it's just cleanup items in the arterial map to make sure the map is up to date every year. And then lastly, there's a glossary of commonly used terms. Next slide. One new thing that's occurred this year is we've always, and historically, we've prioritized our transportation projects by which projects were able to get grant funding. And really, we were so reliant on grants that whatever project got grants was the one that moved forward. Well, now I'll touch on this a little later in my presentation. There's multiple revenue sources for transportation, and it's known as the street funding strategy. And that's given us flexibility to implement projects, at least start them down to the design path or down through in the right-of-way path without relying on grants. And because of that, we needed a way to prioritize and rank our transportation projects. So we've endeavored on this year's version is interim, but longer term, we're including as part of our transportation system plan update, a more detailed and robust ranking and prioritization process. But we wanted to start something with an interim and get kind of the discussion going, be able to test it out, score some projects and see how they scored, see how our criteria affected things, and just see how it was working. So all that to say, this year includes an interim scoring and prioritization process for our transportation projects. And I'll kind of go through how we implemented that this year, and then we can take a look at how the project scored. We started with the comprehensive plan policies, the financial policies, and the strategic goals. And when you go through those planning documents, those high-level planning documents, there were 8 high-level policy priorities that really rose to the top, especially for transportation. And they're shown on that 4th bullet. They were safety, equity, climate or environment, congestion management, economic development, multimodal improvements, project viability, and taking care of what we have. So these 8 policy priorities kind of rose to the top, and then we had to find a way to score projects against them. So within each of the policy priorities are criteria that allow you to score a project based on safety or based on equity or based on climate. And so after it's all said and done, you add all of the scores up from all of the 8 policy priorities, and a project scores on a range from 0 to 100, 100 being the highest. And then based on that, that tells you what your prioritization and scoring is for your transportation projects. One thing sure, go ahead.
Policy considered to be equally important as any other one? Or
It was not. It was not. So we staff internally got together, planning and engineering and management, and each of us individually scored what we thought was the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, all the way down to 8th priority. And when you bring those all together, it was from about 15 or 20 different staff. Then that's how they prioritized which priority held the most weight versus, and really when I say weight, they basically score the most points. So like safety, for example, I think the maximum allowed for safety was like 18 points. The maximum available for like taking care of what you have is like 10 points. So that kind of is how it's weighted.
Okay, so is this in order of that kind of importance list?
It was not. And I can get more information to the commission members about how the scoring criteria came out. I have an example scoring sheet that kind of shows you what each of these criteria or each of the policy priorities, what the maximum point value is. And then you can also see the criteria that were used within each of these policy priorities.
Oh,
and again, this is all interim,
in.
kind of working through the test. I apologize, go ahead.
I would find that very interesting.
Okay. Okay, so after you score these projects and you have your scores from 0 to 100, what we found while going through this process is that large arterial projects don't score the same as multimodal projects, and those are different than signal projects. And so it's difficult to score different types of projects against each other. So what we found is that by scoring large arterial projects against arterial projects and multimodal against multimodal and signal against signal, it gives you a much better feel for which projects which within each of those buckets are the higher priority. And interestingly, it worked out well because when on the next presentation that I'm going to give to you guys about grants, you'll see that several of the granting agencies, that's how they allocate their scoring as well, as they have a pot of money for large arterial capacity projects, they have a pot of money for multimodal, and then they have a pot of money for signals. So it works out to score these projects against each other because it ties in with our granting agencies as well. Next slide. So I apologize, I hope this is readable for folks. These are the scores that we came up with, and on the left column is the capacity, in the middle is the multimodal, and on the right are the signal projects. And it turned out fairly well, staff thought, for the scoring, because First Street was the highest ranking project for the capacity projects, and that is the highest priority, transportation priority project in the city, according to staff and what we're telling our lobbyists, et cetera. So that seemed to make sense. On the multimodal side, the Transportation System Plan update, the Columbia Street Complete Street Project, and the Divine Sidewalk Project all rose to the top. And those are all funded projects, so that was a good sign. And then on the signal side, the Mill Plain Arrival on Green project and the Andreessen Fourth Plain Boulevard intersection improvements and the Columbia Street and 13th Street intersection, all of those rose to the top, and those are all funded as well. So for this interim process, what we went through to reach these final numbers seems to pan out with what we expected. So it was a good sign in that regard. What I will say though, is this is interim, and as part of the Transportation System Plan update, we will be working with our consultant to revise our process, and it'll be a much bigger undertaking, be a lot more public outreach, and we're hoping to be able to improve on what we started here, but we think it's a good start. Next slide. Okay, so now we'll just touch on each of the lists that I talked about, the funded list and the partially funded list. On the funded list, there's not a lot of arterial projects fully funded at this time. There's a lot that are in the works, but not a lot that are fully funded. The only one that is First Street from the west leg from 164th to 177th. On the traffic side, we have that Columbia and 13th Street signal, and then that Mill Plain Arrival on Green, which will be done fairly soon here. And then on the multimodal side, we have the Transportation System Plan, which is currently underway. The Divine Sidewalks from Mill Plain to 18th, which will be under construction this year. Fourth Plain pedestrian enhancements, which will start design this year. And the Columbia Street Complete Street project, which will go to construction this year. Next slide. For the partially funded projects, these are the ones that are in the works right now. So each of these projects are in differing phases of design and right-of-way acquisition, with the end goal of getting them construction ready and applying for grants to get them into the construction phase. But we have 137th Avenue from 49th to 4th Plain. And as those of you that may have driven around the city in that area, we've had multiple phases of 137th, kind of working our way from south to north. So this is the last leg of that street to be improved. We have the Jefferson Street realignment. This is a connecting Evergreen to Mill Plain. So it's connecting basically the waterfront up to Mill Plain, the new waterfront, via Jefferson Street, and correcting that offset of Jefferson at 13th. And then we have 18th Street. This is another multi-phase arterial project. So we've recently improved the eastern side of 205 out to about 136th. This phase is improving the west side of 205 from 97th to 107th. And then we have the First Street, the eastern phase from 177th to 192nd. So this is all of these we will be applying for grants in the coming years to hopefully get them to the construction phase. On the multimodal front, we have multiple phases of the Evergreen Highway path, which is a path that extends along Evergreen Highway all the way east to west. And some portions have been constructed, very, very few, but we continue to work, we continue to design and buy right-of-way as needed to ultimately build this pathway. And so we continue to pursue funding opportunities for that. And then 68th Street sidewalks, that's a coordination project with Clark County to improve 68, to put in sidewalk along 68th Street. There's a portion that's in the city limits and a portion that's in the county. So we're coordinating with them to get that to construction. Next slide, please. Okay, so those last projects were actual projects, like they have a start date, an end date, and then there's an end product when it's done. We also have these programs. Programs are something that has a pot of money set aside each year, and the program is intended to achieve certain goals each year. So you can see the top one on the list there is the pavement management program. This really isn't a capital program. It's really considered more of an operational and maintenance product, but it's such a large program that we've been including it just to show the sheer magnitude of this. So this pavement management consists of when they overlay a street, when they just do a surface treatment on a street. It also includes curb ramps when they do curb ramps adjacent to an overlay project. So this 11.5 million per year encompasses all of that work that's done. Then we have the neighborhood traffic management program. This is a program administered by the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Alliance, which is a group of neighborhood associations that come together, and neighborhood associations propose traffic calming projects in their neighborhood. The NTSA approves whatever projects they're going to approve that year, and then they go and get constructed. And that pot of money is $300,000 per year. We have the multimodal safety and accessibility program. This is a program to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety throughout the city. And just recently it was increased from $500,000 up to $1 million per year in order to move forward some key safety projects in the near term. Then we have the traffic signal and lighting sustainability program. That's a program to replace signals and streetlights that are reaching the end of their useful life. And that's funded at $415,000 per year. And then we have the sidewalk management program, which is a program where the city can improve sidewalks along city-owned properties, but it also helps citizens who have defects in sidewalks in front of their property and helps to work through the process of getting those defects corrected. So that's funded at $500,000 per year. Next slide.
To be clear, that sidewalk, that is not infill projects.
Correct. It's only to correct defects in front of citizens or city property.
Okay, so infill sidewalks would be some sort of capital expense to be figured out by this process?
If there's infill sidewalk, that would be put, so multiple ways that it could be built, right? It could be done by development. It could be done as part of a larger capital arterial project. But if it's just a standalone sidewalk infill project, that would likely be a good candidate for that multimodal safety and accessibility program that I mentioned that was funded at $1 million per year. So that's where those are captured.
So I remember hearing a presentation, I think from Rebecca Kennedy to council. Gosh, this must have been, I don't know, quite some time ago, in the dead of winter possibly, I don't remember. She was speaking in particular about an infill along Southeast 10th, kind of as it crosses over Ellsworth. So that would be in that $1 million bucket?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a pot of money that could be used for that. I mean, we could apply for a grant for that project as well. That project is on the unfunded list as a unfunded sidewalk project, but okay. Yeah, that's a candidate for one of those.
I noticed that there's a dip in the pavement presentation funding in 2020. Why did that occur?
Yeah, so this is the expense graph for all costs for City of Vancouver transportation. So this includes operations and maintenance costs, as well as debt service if we have some, as well as capital expenses. And you can see at the bottom there is our operations and maintenance costs. Those are like potholes and different repairs that our operations crews go out and fix. And then, as you mentioned, the pavement management program is shown in red there. And you can see that dip, and that is because of COVID. So back when COVID started, that was about March or April of last year, there was a lot of uncertainty about how much money we would have for the year. And so we tried to pull back on a lot of our spending, both capital and pavement management related, just to be on the safe side. We weren't sure what was going to happen. Well, it turned out to be financially for our streets not as bad as we had expected. And so you'll see that the expenses have risen back up to full funding in 2021. But yeah, the reason for that dip is because of trying to be cautious during COVID.
That's been one of my concerns with the city, is that pavement presentation tends to get neglected. It's an easy one to drop off, but the long-term ramifications of not keeping up with that are increased capital expenses when the streets have to be replaced instead of maintaining them as we go along.
Yeah, those are good points. And we do try to stay on top of our pavements. We've actually been making pretty good progress on improving our pavement conditions citywide. That COVID shouldn't impact us too much. It'll slow down how our pace of improving our streets, but as long as we can get back to our full funding like we have, our pavement management group thinks we'll continue to improve the condition of our pavements across the city. So then continuing on, you can see the debt service, and debt service is historically for transportation, we used to pay for our capital projects by issuing bonds, which is like a credit card. So we would take out these bonds, and then you have to pay those bonds back over a 20-year period. So that's what that debt service is signifying. We're still paying off some of that debt that we used to pay for capital projects a long time ago. And then on the top of the chart, you can see the capital expenditures. You can see how they peak and valley because the construction costs, when we get to the construction phase, that's the most expensive part of a project. And then in some years, we're more working on design and right of way. So maybe there's a little bit less of a peak, but we've tried to flatten that out to be pretty consistent year after year. Next slide, please.
Is there a strategy to avoid bonds in the future?
There is, and I'm going to touch on that here in a couple slides. If you can just table that question for a minute, I'll
Sure.
address it here in the next slide, I think. Okay, so now we're looking at the revenue side. That last slide was the expense side. This is the revenue side, and this is only the revenues for our day-to-day, like operating and maintenance, pavement preservation, and paying our debt. Like these are our everyday costs. The next slide will be the revenue for the capital costs. So let's just concentrate on the operation and day-to-day stuff. You can see that real estate excise tax is at the bottom. That makes up a portion of it. That's, when properties get sold in the city limits, part of those revenues go to the city, and then part of that revenue gets allocated to transportation. Motor vehicle fuel tax. This is the tax that everybody pays at the fuel pump when you fill up your car. The general fund contributes a lot of money towards street maintenance, and general fund gets a lot of their money from like property taxes or sales taxes. Then there's a little bit of miscellaneous money, and then there's this street funding strategy money. And this is where I wanted to spend a little bit of time explaining it to you guys. And this will get to the question about, is there a way to get away from using debt? And that's what really this street funding strategy was all about, because back in 2015, the council, everyone recognized our debt service had hit $5 million per year. And they said, we just can't keep using our credit card to pay for transportation capital. So they said, what can we do? What revenues do we have to help pay for transportation capital moving forward? So they came up with this street funding strategy revenues package. And what it consists of is, first and foremost, the Transportation Benefit District was created. That allowed, the benefit district was then able to assess a vehicle license fee to people within the city of Vancouver limits when they renew their vehicle license. And the fee is $40 per renewal. And that generates about $5 million per year. So that's about $5 million of the vehicle license fee. Of the street funding strategy. They also raised utility taxes. So the city can charge water and sewer and storm for using the city's roads for holding their utilities. Well, they increased that tax to 1.5%, by 1.5%. and that generated $2 million per year. They also implemented a business license surcharge fee. So that's a fee that each employer pays based on the number of employees that they have. Right now, it's at the $40 of that fee goes towards the street funding strategy, and that generates about $1 million. Then there's debt service. So as this debt service falls off, as we pay off our bonds, it was decided that that revenue going to pay that debt service should be reinvested back into transportation. So currently that's about $2.2 million per year. And then the last piece is a little smaller piece. At the state level, they had reallocated how the motor vehicle fuel tax would be allocated to cities. So it gave us about a $500,000 bump in revenues, and it was decided to lump that in with this street funding strategy. So when you add all of those revenue sources together, that's about $10 to $11 million per year of new revenues above and beyond what the city was collecting before. And the intent there is, for one, so that we don't have to use debt moving forward. We can proactively pursue grant opportunities with the money that we have in hand. And that money, that street funding strategy money, goes to pavement preservation. I mean, we already had base amount of money for all of this stuff, but this enhanced everything. So additional money to pavement management. Then we allocated money towards that, like those programs I had mentioned, the multimodal safety and accessibility, the traffic signal and lighting sustainability, the sidewalk management program, the neighborhood traffic calming program. So all of those programs are funded with this new money. In addition, we're doing more right-of-way maintenance and things like that. So this new revenue came in, and they really wanted to enhance and build on what we were already doing. So I know that was a lot of time spent on that topic, but I think it's important for everyone to kind of realize where that street funding strategy, how we got to where we are today.
Question: is it realistic to think that the motor vehicle fuel tax will sustain itself given the onslaught of electric cars and new fuel efficiency that we're experiencing with existing?
Yeah, that is a struggle. It's a struggle across the board. The state they realize that as well, because a lot of their revenues come from gas tax. So they just, I think, recently wanted to raise it again. And I know what you're saying. It's not an ideal tax because of that, and people are just driving less. And so they're trying to come up with other options. They've thrown out an idea of a road usage tax, and they've done a pilot on that process. So maybe that's a longer term solution. So I know they're working on that, but for the time being, that motor vehicle fuel tax is all we've got to work with.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, we're assuming that the general fund will continue to contribute to this. Is that realistic given the budget constraints that the city is under?
So there is a policy, a financial policy, that says the general fund will ensure that pavement management is funded to X dollar amount per lane mile that the city owns and maintains of road. So there is a policy in place to make that happen. I mean, the city council has the authority to change their policies, but as it is right now, there's a policy that says that the general fund is supposed to make that happen.
Cross our fingers.
Yeah, so far so good. I mean, another concern for everyone is the stability of the vehicle license fee. With the initiative 976 that just occurred, and what went on with that. And so we are going to have discussions with council later this year or early in 2022 to see if there's other options out there for a more stable funding source. But those discussions will occur. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the revenues for the capital side only. And you can see that transportation impact fees and developer contributions, they're a pretty small portion, but they've been consistent. And it's been a good, even in down years, we've always had the ability to use transportation impact fees to help move projects forward. Then you can see bonds have been used recently on some transportation projects. Most, in particular, the waterfront access, the tunnels that were punched underneath the railroad berm, and some of the road infrastructure built down there, they use bonds for that. And then the grants are playing a big picture in the future, a little less in the past, just because we haven't had the local match to pursue as many grant opportunities. But going forward, now that we have this more stable revenue source, we can start to bring in more grant dollars. And then you see the street funding strategy layered on top of that for capital work. Next slide. This chart shows the debt service. You can see in 2015, it was about $5 million per year. And then it's slowly dropped off as the years have gone on. And as I had mentioned, every time it drops off, that money is being reinvested back into transportation. And you can see the different revenue sources that are paying for debt right now. The real estate excise tax. We do have a portion of the employee surcharge that is paying for debt. And we have the general fund that's helping pay for some of the debt. And it's pretty flat for the next few years. And then in 2026, there's another drop off. Next slide. Okay.
Is the excise tax the tax that's levied on the sale of real estate?
It is.
Given the rising prices of real estate, I would imagine that would increase. You've kept it flat.
Well, keep in mind for that chart, that was just what's being allocated for debt service. And so we're just paying a fixed amount per year for 20 years on
Got
debt.
it. Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're into the arterial map updates. And I've split this into the west half and the east half just to try to make it more readable. Now that I'm looking at it, it's still not very readable. So I apologize for that.
No key.
I didn't include the key. The document has the key associated with it, but just for the purposes of showing the city and the changes to the map, I didn't include that just to try to make it blow it up as much as possible. Okay, and I apologize. I don't have a cursor to maneuver, so it's hard for me to point it out, but I'll try to do my best here. The only change on the west side of the city that's being proposed is if you look west of Fruit Valley, where about 39th Street is, there's a little dotted line that goes north and south. And that is what used to be the 26th Avenue extension. Well, that 26th Avenue extension is now not being proposed. Instead, they want to build what they call the 32nd Avenue extension. So it's a little further to the west. And so 26th Avenue is not going to be built as an arterial. It may be built by a developer as a local access street, but not as an arterial. So their proposal is to remove the dotted line where 26th Avenue was. Next slide, please. Okay, on the east side, there's several updates that we're proposing. In the southwest corner of the city, there's a red line for where 34th Street is, down in the very southeast corner of the city. Just north of 34th is a dotted line for 29th Street. That's a new street that we're proposing as an arterial. And the main reason for that is because there's a developer who's currently proposing to build a portion of that street. And then it would line up with 29th Street to the west. So that's a proposed arterial. There was an arterial proposed at about 25th Street, but that's not going to be proposed anymore because of this development that's occurring.
I have a question. And I'm sorry, it's very loud where I am, but so I apologize for the noise. But on these arterial maps, this is all based on automobile movement. Is that correct?
It is. The way our code is currently written, the arterial classifications are based on traffic volumes.
So is it possible that we'll have some way to create maps that highlight the movement of pedestrians and cyclists, this multimodal, so that when we're applying for grants or when we're looking for movement through the city, we'll be able to focus on areas?
For sure. Yeah, there's already a map in place, actually, especially for bicycle facilities. It's outdated. It's from like 2004. And as part of the transportation system plan update, there will definitely be maps created for bike and pedestrian and transit and freight. So there'll be a map for each of those components.
Okay, because most of the time when I see arterials, it's strictly this kind of, I mean, I know there's a separate bicycle map, but when I'm looking at an overview, it'd be nice if there were something on one of these maps that shows, that highlights where cyclists are most likely to move.
Yeah, I think we can incorporate that as part of the TSP. Jennifer, do you have anything you want to add about that?
No, I think you did a great job responding to that, Chris. So yeah, we are going to also look at, through the transportation system plan process, kind of re-looking and redoing our street standards. So that potentially might create kind of what you're thinking, Leah, in terms of a more comprehensive map or more comprehensive overview or approach to the citywide system. So we'll be working on that as well.
And that'd be great. Thanks.
I have a question. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
When you talk about these arterial streets, and like 34th to me looks like that's Vic. That's, you know, they're applying for the rezone from light industrial to mixed use. And then yet we have that HP project going up over on First Street near Costco, that big 15-year project. When you're looking at arterial streets, are these developers coming in their master plans, and are they making a commitment to help pay for some of these streets? How does all that work?
Yes, that is a big part of it. We rely on development heavily to help us kind of build our backbone. We call these arterials kind of our backbone of our system, getting people from point A to point B. And we do rely on development to help complete the backbone. So yeah, when we negotiate agreements with developers, part of the agreement is that they will complete part of the roadway system.
And that's project by project, I'm assuming, right? When you're making these agreements?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, when it's a larger development that affects multiple streets, you know, then there'd be more streets included in their agreement. Whereas a smaller development may just have their road frontage, you know. But yeah, in every case, there's an agreement reached where the developers help improve the city's infrastructure.
Chris, I have a question as well. When we look at this idea of arterial, is this in contrast to grid?
No, I think they go hand in hand. I mean, arterials are meant to carry larger volumes of traffic, but you still want a grid pattern for arterials. Okay. And then within the arterials, you're going to have local access streets, and you want grid systems within those local access streets as well. So it's kind of building a grid on top of a grid.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next change I wanted to talk about is for Burton /28. So by 205, there was a small section, it's corrected on this map, but there was a small section of Burton that was shown as a principal arterial. It was shown in red. And you can see the rest of Burton and 28 are all minor arterial, colored kind of a magenta. And so we thought it would be appropriate to make all of Burton and 28 the same, and not just have a short section of red in between. And then the last change in designation is up in the Berkshire area, up in the northeast portion of the city, just south of 4th Plain. There was a street being proposed east-west called 63rd Street between 147th and 162nd. But that, as part of negotiations with development, that is not being proposed, and they're proposing other east-west connections in lieu of that. So that street is being removed, is proposed to be removed as an arterial. Okay, then we have some other changes that are just really cleanup items. They're changing a road from proposed to constructed as development occurs. And so some changes there are up in the Berkshire area again, kind of between 137th and 127th. There's been some streets constructed recently, and so they're being changed from dashed lines to solid lines. Or, yeah, that's right, dashed line to solid. And then there's a small section of 5th Street down by Mill Plain, just east of 205, that is shown as a dash line, but that is constructed, so that will be changed to a solid line. And then the last change is up in section 30. So in the northeast section of section 30 is the Harmony Sports Complex. And we're currently negotiating with them how 13th Street, which is the east-west arterial, will kind of make its way through the soccer fields. And so the street will go through, but the ultimate alignment is still in question. So we've just kind of changed the line work on that street just to show it as possibly changing an alignment. Okay, and so that covers all of the arterial changes. And so we can go to the next slide. As far as public outreach for the TIP and next steps, we're meeting with the commission tonight. We have, I have a meeting with the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Alliance on May 18th, which is the neighborhood associations. We have a joint City Council Transportation Benefit District, and it's actually May 24th. That's a mistake on the slide there. It's actually May 24th. And then we have the actual public hearing to adopt the TIP on June 21st. The draft document is currently available on the city's website. Citizens can go to this link that's shown on this slide and provide comments via that link. There's a form they can fill out. And then we've used other communications like Vancouver Connects and Office of Neighborhoods to try to reach some of the neighborhood associations as well. So with that concludes my presentation about the TIP, and I'm happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
Yeah, hi, Chris. I do have a question on that very last one there that you had mentioned on the very last page there. I apologize, it just went away before I had a chance to compound on that. Let me see if I can pull up my copy of it here. Hold on. 2 more pages, please. It was the last one. Jan, if you're walking through it there. Thank you. On that May 18th, and this is more of a personal question, I guess, maybe, but on the May 18th, the neighborhood associations has that invitation been sent out to the neighborhood associations, or how is that being posted for participation?
I think Anna is on the call. Anna, can you confirm how that word goes out? Or Jennifer?
I'm sorry, I had to step away for just a moment. Can you repeat the question, please?
The question is about how the word gets out to the neighborhood associations for the upcoming Neighborhood Traffic Safety Alliance meeting.
That's a good question. I know the chair of the NTSA has a pretty robust sort of email distribution list and is pretty proactive in reaching out to neighborhood associations.
Okay.
So I have one question. Quite a ways back in the presentation, you had the 3 categories of programs with their prioritization numbers. I was kind of curious, just if you even back some more, even more. Yeah, this one here is if there's any way that there's some very broad brush. Okay, capacity is being allocated, $11 and multimodal is, something else, and Signal something else. Is there some way that, or some way I could understand which of these categories are how they're or the dollars that they're being funded with? I mean, not where they're from, but how much?
Yeah, I mean, all of them are eligible for grants in one form or another. So when you throw in grants to the mix, there's a lot of money to be had out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it just means that we have to find the local match to go after those grants.
I guess what I mean is, what would be the cost of a project number 870? Just to pick one off here, score 70.
Yeah, so if I may, I can answer that first question that you had asked, and then I can answer that second one. So capacity, we have to come up with the local match for grants, and those are typically, the local matches are like millions of dollars because the construction phase, right, is a lot of money. Multimodal, the match for grants is typically much less because they're much smaller scale projects. So maybe you're talking hundreds of thousands, if maybe even 100,000. And then Signal, those are not often grant funded, but when they are, the match is under 100,000 probably to get that. So your question about, and let me just also, you had asked if there was pots of money available, and there are. The multimodal is funded under that multimodal safety and accessibility program, which is $1 million allocated per year for that. And then the signals, there's that traffic signal and sustainability program, which is funded at $415,000 per year. So that's funded, that has that pot of money. And then capacity, the Transportation Benefit District has been kind of used as the local match to pursue these grant opportunities for these larger arterial projects. So there's not a defined pot of money set aside for those large projects, but as those opportunities come along, we kind of weigh which ones to go after or not. Okay, and then you had a question about 870, and your question was how much that project costs?
I was just kind of vaguely curious, like, okay, what's the cost of these different categories?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, like the arterial projects, they're in the $10 to $20 million per mile range, depending on how many lanes and all of that go into it. Multimodal, the Divine Sidewalk, that's a pretty long stretch of sidewalk, and that's about $1 million. And then signal projects are, 300 to 400,000 range for a new signal. So that kind of gives you a ballpark for cost.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, just really quickly on the question of the NTSA reaching out to neighborhood associations. If you want to, propose that the NTSA connect with the neighborhood association that you believe they have not yet connected with or that is not yet involved, then we're happy to facilitate that connection between the chair and the neighborhood association. If you just want to contact me, then I can make that introduction or connection or whatever is necessary. I didn't know if that's sort of where the question was coming from. Just want to throw that out there.
I have another question.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, thank you, Anna. That does help. Teresa, if I may, I was just trying to find my unmute button. I did want to follow up, Ken, on what you had asked about on the funding. Chris, I don't know if this is in speaking and listening to you speak, I was able to find a spot on here which was the TIP projects and programs. I know this is old. It was adopted in June 17th of 2019. It does have a list of a lot of the funding, site projects, specific projects and funding. Is that something that's still updated, or are you aware of that?
I don't know if I quite followed you. So you found a document. Where did you find the document?
I believe it was on the transportation. I'd have to go back and look at where my hold on for just a moment. I will find the access to it. It's called the Transportation Projects and it's a map of Vancouver, and it shows all the current projects in there. And if you click on one of them, it brings up the site-specific project and gives a little bit of a estimated project cost, whether it's been funded or not. And that cityofvancouver.maps.rcgis.
Yeah, there's a map on our TIP webpage, a searchable map. It's created through our geographic information systems, that's GIS. And yeah, that will get updated after council approves the new tip. We'll update those project lists with the new information.
I have a question before we
I was
leave.
hoping that might help. Go ahead.
I just had a question before we leave this slide, but I can wait.
Sure. I kind of interrupted Teresa. Teresa, did you have something that you wanted to add? Thank you for your patience.
That's okay, thank you. When this information is taken to the neighborhood association, will they see the same slideshow presentation that we're seeing?
Yes, I took out a lot of the financial, especially the revenue side, because I didn't want to overwhelm them. But the rest of the slideshow is similar, yeah.
Do you think they'll also have questions about cost? Residents often have questions about cost.
Yeah, and I do have the expense slide. I just didn't include the revenue slides.
Okay. And then my second question is that these scores were developed by a criteria, and we see these scores. We don't actually see the point value of each one of these. So because some scores are higher, do they get first priority as you begin to work on these? And what if residents don't agree with the scoring system?
Yeah, so for this interim process, a lot of our projects are already down the path of getting funded, right? So they're in the works for design or right-of-way or construction. So these scores aren't necessarily going to affect how we allocate money because the projects are already living on their own. But as we go through the transportation system plan process and the scoring gets more refined, and as we move along in the years, we will be able to start using the pots of money that I talked about, the $1 million for multimodal, maybe some of the future arterial projects. We can use that scoring to help prioritize future projects, but it won't really affect the projects that are on this list now.
And when it's taken to neighborhood associations in the city, for public input, will they be able to give comments about something that they perceive as more important? Will they have that opportunity?
Certainly. I would direct them to that website where they can make comments, and they can provide the comment about why they feel that it should be scored differently. What I will say though is what we want to build in here is a scoring process that's not subjective. Like they're easy questions to answer. And so when I share the scoring sheet with everyone on this call, you'll be able to see we tried to do that. We tried to make a simple yes or no type answer that it's hard to argue with the answer on that project. And so each of the categories should be, and moving forward, we want to continue that with the TSP update.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. So I assume that some of these projects, like the capacity, probably might have some multimodal element. So how does that kind of thing show up? So would it show up in multiple categories if it was capacity and multimodal?
That's a good question, because we struggled with that too. You're absolutely right. All of our arterial projects are building sidewalks, they're building bike facilities, they're obviously improving vehicle usage. So yeah, what we ended up doing is we wanted to make sure multimodal because it's one of the top policy priorities, we wanted to make sure that it had its own criteria. So the criteria that were used for multimodal, and when you score a project against multimodal, are different than how you score a project for like congestion management, for example, right? Because multimodal is in theory, reducing congestion. But we wanted to separate those two so you weren't double counting multimodal in different priorities.
So the good news is that some of the capacity stuff will just help with multimodal. It just won't be counted as in that bucket.
For the interim process, that's the way it was done. And we can review that as part of the updated process, but it seems to keep it clean if you don't, because if you start double counting, then it starts maybe overweighing one thing against another.
No, it seems like I like it. I just was saying it's not obvious at first, but yeah, as long as it's still building all capacity.
I guess I'll just jump in. So Chris, can you kind of explain a bit further? It seems like the projects are grouped in these buckets first, and then the scoring's done. I guess when I'm looking at the scoring and I'm seeing, for instance, the second to last multimodal project weighs higher than the first signal project. Those are grouped initially into buckets and then scored according to the same metrics that others are?
Yeah, so the questions are the same questions for every single project. And after you answer those questions, it spits out a score. And we noticed the same thing you did. We originally just had this long list of every single project and its score. And when you rank these from highest to lowest, that's exactly what we found. We're like, the signal projects can't compete with anybody, right, but they're still important. And so that's why we kind of came to that conclusion that we needed to compare apples to apples. And that's why we proposed to do it this way for this interim process.
Gotcha. Okay.
So maybe another follow-up on that would be I've been asking about budget stuff. It would be kind of interesting to do a calculation of kind of bang for buck. You know, maybe some of these signal things their scores are fairly low, but the cost is fairly low.
Yeah,
you did say that I think that signals tend to be cheaper projects.
Yeah, there's a criteria called project viability, and built within that policy priority called project viability is there, how much grant money is there to pay for the project? So if you have, 100% grant, that helps that criteria, that priority and that scoring for that project to move it up. Or if you have a coordination with another agency that is going to really improve the region or something. So we tried to take into account some of that, but yeah, it's difficult to do, but I think it's something to consider for the future update.
I think that's a pretty good segue. Does anyone else have any last questions on this before we move into the next informational item, which actually identifies transportation grant opportunities and may ask some of those funding questions for us?
Actually, I was curious if it's okay, Mike. I was curious about like how we are defining some of these things. Like, safety is obvious, but what exactly, are the definitions of these discrete measures, these 8 policy priorities, like equity, is equity new now? Is it informed by something else? Climate, environment. So are those defined somewhere?
Yeah, we struggled with that too, especially equity and climate, because the city hasn't landed on what equity and climate means yet. So for this interim process, we've gotten far enough along in the transportation system plan process we have a proposed option to how to look at equity, and it basically overlays things like renting, and I apologize, I wrote this down earlier, but I lost it. So Anna, if you can chime in and remind me what criteria are included in the equity lens.
Yeah, so it's race, income, renter status, and education.
And again, the city hasn't officially adopted that, but this being proposed as part of the TSP. And so we've brought that in with this interim process, laid it on a map, and basically said if a project is adjacent to one of the more vulnerable areas, then it got more points in the equity score. So that's kind of how we did it. And we did similar things for the other criteria. For example, climate. If a project has less impacts on the environment, so when we do these large projects, they typically require environmental impact studies or different environmental documentation. And if a project didn't require that because it's less impactful on the environment, then it scored higher. So that's kind of how we try to incorporate those kind of things.
I have another question. Sometimes at city council, they keep talking about putting in broadband, you know, when you're doing all these street repairs and things, the infrastructure for broadband. Is that happening within these projects? And then is that considered under climate? What category does that come under? Does that come under equity?
Well, so to answer the first question, especially on our large arterial projects, we always include conduit and fiber, especially for like interconnecting our signals, but also we put in spare fiber for future usage. As far as how to include that in the criteria for scoring, it didn't rise to the top of, you know, but there's a lot of other factors to consider when you talk about congestion management or multimodal or safety or equity. And so whether a project includes fiber or not didn't rise as one of the criteria to score a project against.
Well, that concludes our questions for the Transportation Improvement Program. Would you care to speak to the grant opportunities for us, please, Chris?
Yeah, so Jan, if you could move on to the next slide deck.
You would think with 2 bachelor degrees, I could figure this out much more easily. Sorry, guys. Oh, goodness. Okay, share.
You're talking to a group that a third of us had trouble dialing in, so I think you're safe, Jan.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer, talk me through this thing here.
So it's just, it's the little screen icon. It looks like the old school like projector.
There we go. There we go.
There you go.
Woohoo!
Perfect. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so for today's presentation, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and I'm just going to touch on the ones that we use the most often. So it's not all encompassing, but it'll give you information about the ones that we use the most often. We'll talk about Federal Highway Administration grants, other federal grants, Washington State Department of Transportation, and then Transportation Improvement Board, which is another state agency. Next slide, please. Okay, for FHWA, that's a section of the federal government. Their money funnels through Washington State Department of Transportation local programs to the agencies, to the city, for example, when there's a federal grant awarded. The people that award the grant are the Regional Transportation Council. That's our metropolitan planning organization for the Clark County area. So through RTC, we apply for grants. They score our grants, and then basically the highest scoring grants within the region get the money first, second, third, etc. So the federal grants that come through RTC are surface transportation block grants. Those are typically for larger arterial type projects. The limit is $5 million per mile, and that includes design, right-of-way, construction. We've actually been very successful with this program through the years. We've used it a lot to fund our arterial projects. We've funded multiple phases of 18th Street, and we will be pursuing funding for the western leg that I mentioned, west of 205. We've funded First Street. The western phase has some of this money, federal money in it. The 137th Avenue, multiple phases. Each phase had this pot of money in it to help pay for that. And then the Jefferson Street realignment has this money in it as well. So we've been very successful in using this grant program. The Congestion Management Air Quality Grant, as the name suggests, it's intended for projects that reduce congestion or improve air quality. It's a smaller pot of money than the STBG. It usually typically goes for buses because they're obviously right down there that alley. But it also can be used for projects like signal optimization or interconnecting a corridor to make it operate more efficiently. And we have used this program in the past to help with some of our corridors. There's also the Transportation Alternatives Program, a smaller pot of money, and it's only offered every other year. But the intent of this program is to promote other types of transportation, other alternatives besides cars. So bicycles, peds, that's what this program is for. And we've been successful in the past getting grants for example, Evergreen Highway Path was funded with that. We also partnered with the county for that 68th Street sidewalk project that I had mentioned. And we've done the Northwest Neighborhood Connectivity Project. We designed that project, which is that Northwest Neighborhood Connectivity is out along Lincoln, out by Franklin Elementary. And then the last item on this slide is FHWA earmarks. So you may have heard that earmarks may be making a comeback. They have not been around for a decade or more. And if they do make a comeback, it's basically the representatives and the senators selecting projects to award money to. So we've worked with our lobbyists to submit our priorities to both the House of Representatives and the senators, so that if they do come back, they have our priorities in hand. And as I shared with you guys, First Street, the eastern phase from 177th to 192nd is our highest priority. Next slide. As far as other federal opportunities, the U.S. Department of Transportation, they administer the Tiger, what used to be called Tiger, then it got changed to Build, and the most recent version of it is called RAISE, is the acronym. It's intended for larger construction-ready projects, and I think the minimum request is $5 million. So we've applied for First Street, the eastern half, for the last 2 years for the Build program. We were unsuccessful. We are proposing to apply for the RAISE program again this year, and hopefully we will be successful this time. Another opportunity is called Infra, short for infrastructure. And this one's even for larger projects. So this one, it has a small pot of money available for $5 to $25 million projects, but a huge pot of money available for $25+ million size projects. So really big stuff. The only one that really we have an opportunity on this is the 32nd Avenue extension that I had mentioned earlier. It's west of Fruit Valley. It's kind of an industrial connector route. So that when you look at all of the phases of that 32nd Avenue extension, you're up in like the $100 million range. So that may be a potential for a future grant application under this program. The next bullet is the U.S. Department of Commerce. Underneath them is the Economic Development Administration. So they have this grant program that is really trying to encourage economic development. And the typical project size is around the $3 to $4 million per project that they would award money for. That's the size of the grant award, not the size of the project. So an example of one that we've used in the past is for the waterfront access project for the tunnels that we punched underneath the railroad berm and some of that street infrastructure down there on the waterfront. We utilized EDA grant money. The only negative with EDA is that it has very different requirements than FHWA or even US Department of Transportation. So for example, on that waterfront project, we actually had to bid 2 separate projects because we couldn't use the same rules that EDA wanted and that FHWA wanted. So it forced us to bid 2 separate projects. So they don't work well together, but it is an opportunity out there. Under housing and urban development, there is a community development block grant. It had been used in years past for smaller sidewalk improvements, like $100,000 to $300,000 range. But what we found in years past, it was just a lot of paperwork and a lot of rules in order to build it that it just was too burdensome. And it really opened us up to possible audit findings just because it was so difficult to administer. And so we decided just for such small projects that just wasn't worth pursuing the money. And then one last item that I wanted to mention that's not on this slide, it's called Federal Lands Access Program. It's short, acronym is FLAP. And as the name suggests, it's intended to improve access to federal lands. So the city doesn't really have federal lands to access to, but National Park Service, which is in the city limits, and the Port of Vancouver both have federal lands that they abut or are encompassed in their property. And they have in years past utilized that program to improve streets and pedestrian ways to the federal lands. An example of that is 5th Street. So the 5th Street down by the Port of Vancouver, National Park Service is currently in the process of improving that street using the FLAP grant, and the city is a partner in that application. Next slide. Okay, now we move on to Washington State Department of Transportation grants. The first one I'll talk about is the Bike and Pedestrian Safety Grant. This is, as the name suggests, for bike and pedestrian safety improvements, and usually smaller pots of money. An example of this grant is for that Divine Sidewalk project. We've combined a state grant with a TIB grant to get that project fully funded. Also, the Columbia Street Complete Street project. We've heard that that project is on the final list for approval and is waiting for legislative approval, but we're hopeful that that will come here in the next couple months. The next bullet item is the City Safety Grant. Again, another pedestrian bicycle oriented safety grant program. We were successful just recently on the 4th Plain and Stapleton intersection improvements. That was a project that was funded via that grant. And it's really intended for pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements at that intersection. There's the Safe Routes to School pot of money. That's intended for pedestrian improvements around schools. We've used that several times in the past, and a current project that is using that is that Northwest Neighborhood Connectivity project that I mentioned, and it's close to Franklin Elementary, so that's how it qualified for that grant program. The Highway Safety Improvement Program, that's an intersection corridor safety program intended more for vehicles, more than ped and bicycle. And we've used it in the past, not very often. Recently, we applied for the intersection of MacArthur and Leaser to improve that intersection, and it was unsuccessful. So we'll continue to look at options for using that grant opportunity. The last bullet on this slide is the Regional Mobility Grant. This is really a transit-oriented grant opportunity. So CTRAN will likely be applying for this, but the city could certainly partner with C-Trend to make the application more appealing. Next slide. And this is the last agency that I was going to share with everyone. The Transportation Improvement Board is a state agency. We've actually been very successful with in coupling the this state money for urban arterials with the federal money for a lot of those large arterial projects, and it ends up their typical range for urban arterial projects is like 3 to 4 million. And then when you couple that with 3 to 4 million from the federal pot for a large arterial project, you know, you're getting $6 or $8 million of grant money to help construct these projects. And we've done that successfully throughout the years. We've done it for First Street. The west phase has both pots of money in there. Multiple phases of 18th Street have used that as well. And we will pursue that same combining these two pots of money for the western phase that's west of 205. 137th, all the previous phases have used the combination of money, and the future phase will. And Jefferson, same thing, coupling federal money with state money to get that construction phase moving along. So that urban arterial program has been successful for us. Another thing that worked out well is the scoring criteria that the Regional Transportation Council uses is very similar to the scoring criteria that TIB uses. And so we kind of have a good feeling that if a project scores well in one of them, it's probably going to score well in the other one. So that's helped us in the past as well. The urban sidewalk program, much smaller program than the urban arterial program, but it's intended for sidewalk improvements. And it was not funded last year because of COVID, but they are bringing it back this year, and we are going to apply for that coordination project with the county, the 68th Street sidewalk project. We're going to team up with the county to hopefully get construction money for that through this program. The Complete Streets program, that's a little bit different program for TIB. Typically, the city applies for a grant, and then the agency grants the money. In this case, the Complete Streets, you actually have to be nominated by a third party. And then TIB considers the nomination, and the nominations are done for people, for agencies that they feel have a good Complete Streets program in place, and they have good projects that are being proposed with that request. So we reached out to several third-party agencies to nominate us, worked with them, got the nomination, and we were successful a couple of years ago getting a grant from TIB. It was $700,000. It was for the McLaughlin Boulevard Complete Streets project, the Tech Center Drive Complete Streets project, and we will be installing several pedestrian and bicycle counters throughout the city with that money as well. So once we spend that $700,000 that was awarded previously from TIB, we'll be able to apply for the Complete Streets grant again. So it's a good program for advancing complete streets. And with that, it's a lot of talking about grants, but that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone have any questions to follow up on that?
Well, I do, Chris. Just because I want to understand this idea of arterial, I guess, a little bit. When you're talking arterial, do they have like an expected capacity? Are they making different distinctions in terms of like estimated speed or the most efficient use of speed? I just want to understand, because I've often heard, which is why I asked that the contrast is between grid and arterial. So can you just, if you don't mind, explain a little bit about that?
I'll try it. If I don't quite answer your question, just let me know or rephrase it, but I'll try. The requirement from most granting agencies is it has to be a certain classification of arterial at a minimum in order to qualify for those larger grant opportunities. And so it's got to be a certain threshold of traffic volumes. And once it reaches that threshold, then that street qualifies for that grant opportunity. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yes, sort of, because I mean, when you're talking about that threshold, I mean, from what I understand, that you know, the expected capacity, or you know, or the most efficient speed, you know, what are those estimated speeds for that? Because you know, wider doesn't necessarily mean better. It can just mean induced use and danger. So I'm just curious, because we've only just said the word arterial, and I'm just wondering how that starts to, as you're drilling down into actually creating these, what are the distinctions between the many ways that roads are created and used?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this will help a little bit. When you look at a couple different arterials within the city of Vancouver, take 18th Street, for example, that was recently improved, and it's it's 2 lanes in each direction with a center median. And then you look at 137th Avenue, which was recently improved, and that's 2 lanes with roundabouts and a median so people can't, you know, make the lefts. 2 completely different ways to go about improving an arterial, but both of them qualified for funding by these granting agencies. And so I don't know if there's one size fits all. It kind of depends on, you know, the land use and what right of way is available, and you know, there's a lot of factors that go into what road gets built out there. I don't know if that helps kind of visualize it or not.
Well, I'm curious what those factors are, I guess, is, you know, when I'm been paying attention to some of these seminars that talk about, you know, like dangerous by design, this idea that they're just, you know, we're just going to keep making very high speed wide roads. And so, but when I was asking you about the difference between grid and arterial, that doesn't seem to be what that is. So when you're talking about those distinctions and those capacities, I'm curious, is it based on the grant then that these buildings are happening with these improvements?
Well, no, I think, like, for example, 18th Street, you know, it connected to Interstate 205, and long term, there's a lot of proposed growth in the area. And so when you look at the traffic studies, the study said it warranted you know, 2 lanes in each direction. When you look at the traffic studies for 137th, they showed that it could work with a 2-lane facility with roundabouts and access management. So I think it's, you know, a traffic study needs to be used when you look at these roads to determine what the appropriate build out of that arterial should be.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And so, and now the whole idea of complete streets is part of that lens.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about a complete street, you're not only taking into account all modes of travel, but you're also taking into account like context of the neighborhood that you're going through, right, and what works for that neighborhood. So yeah, it's definitely part of the mix now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you wouldn't want to be going into with a flat grant to Officers Row and mowing down all those beautiful street trees. I mean, it's the nice thing about in that area is that you're automatically slowed down, because some of these visuals, it's really about how do you get through fast enough, and instead of like what you were just saying, like understanding whether or not it's indigenous to the area.
So I'd like to follow up on that too, if I could. We have, and I'm not sure if we've shared this yet or not, but we have street standards. So for our arterial streets and our local streets, we have a set of standards that are defined in our code, in our city code, and under Title 11, which is the transportation title. And it designates for like a principal arterial, you can design it this way. For collector arterial, you can design it this way. And while there is flexibility with that design, that's kind of the base structure that we use when we're looking at these street designs and when we're building new streets. And those were completed, I think the last time that we like did those or initiated those was back in the late 90s. So it's been a really long time since we've looked at our street standards, and that's something that we'll be doing as part of the transportation system plan process. And we'll probably be working on that early next year. But that is something, as you're making your comments, that's something that we want to incorporate into our street design standards is the context of the area. If an arterial is going through a residential area, it should look very different than, say, a commercial area potentially. So that's something that we want to start to incorporate into our street standards as we look to continue to build out the street system, is the context of the area that it's going through and how that should be designed.
Great. I'm glad to hear that, Jennifer. Thank you.
Sure.
Teresa, you're on mute.
I have a question about the grant process. Is that a really competitive process from city by city, like Seattle and Tacoma and Spokane? And how do we measure up in that? And can we move forward on some of these projects if we don't have grant money?
So the nice thing is that the way it's allocated is by region. So the Southwest region, which is our area, is administered by Regional Transportation Council. And they, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, but they have Skamania, Clark. I think they might have one more county too. But
Klickitat.
Yeah, Klickitat. So we're competing against agencies within that region. So we don't compete against Seattle or any of those northern cities. But at the state level, the money gets allocated to the regions based on population. So the Seattle region is getting more money as a region because there's more people there. But yeah, we're only competing amongst our region. So it's just us here in the Southwest region. And then what was the second question?
Can some of these projects move forward without grant money? I mean, is grant money really important?
Yeah, like I was mentioning, when you couple $3 to $4 million from federal money with $3 to $4 million from state money, then you're talking about $6 or $8 million for these arterial projects. And when you're talking about $10 to $20 million per mile, we definitely need the grant money. We couldn't do it without the grant money.
I just wanted to follow up, Chris. So for the grants that come down, the funding that comes down from the state and the federal government to RTC, we're competing at a regional level, but there are a lot of the programs that are administered through WashDOT. So the Safe Routes to School program, the City Safety program, HSIP, Regional Mobility, and then also the Bike Ped Safety program. We compete at a statewide level. So in those cases, we unfortunately are competing with Seattle, Tacoma, and Spokane. So those are statewide. So those definitely can be a lot more challenging to be successful at grant applications. And then Chris, don't we have kind of a figure? I know it changes year by year, but how much money, and I'm not sure where we're at with that now, but like how much that we put into a project, say we put in $1 and we get X amount of dollars in grants, because we've had to rely on grants to be successful with a lot of our projects. So do you have a sense of what that is right now?
Yeah, I haven't done the actual analysis lately, but I know in the peak time when we were bonding money and we were very successful at getting grants, the highest I think it got was like for every $1 we put in, we got $4 of grant money. Then it started to drop down because we basically didn't have as much local match. And I think it got down to about for every $1, we got $3. And then I think right now we're probably in that range. We're probably more like for every $1 that we put in, we get maybe $2.50 of grant money, I'm guessing. That's my estimate. And keep in mind, that's across the board, by the way. So some projects like there may be some multimodal projects, especially that we're just funding with our own local money and not pursuing any grants. So
Yeah.
it's looking at the entire program across the board.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris. You did a great job with both presentations. And Chris was kind of he was very, well, I appreciate Chris filling in kind of at the last minute with the grant funding opportunities presentation. So thanks for taking the time to put that together and to do a lot of the talking at tonight's meeting for both presentations.
Yeah, I'm actually, it kind of worked out well because as part of the TIP presentation, I think the commissioners may have gotten a good feel for how transportation is funded here at the City of Vancouver, which I think is it's good to understand that.
Yeah.
I want to thank you also. That was great.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
So with that said, that moves us into the next item, which was citizen communication. I don't know that we had anyone, or as Jan said, there was no one that was registered in time for that citizen communication.
That is correct.
So at the risk of sounding like we're going to get out of here real early, the commission communications, we did, and I know that none of us have had, or not all of us have had an opportunity to read through the onboarding session, so we'll leave that tabled for next month. Is there anything else that any of the commissioners feel we should bring up for communication prior to ending this meeting? Matt?
One thing, and we kind of mentioned it last time, but I think we're a very special commission in that we have a student representative. And I don't know what we do to help that student in the future. I don't know if there's a letter of recommendation that we can make for like college preparedness or something that can go into some sort of record that that student can use to kind of better him or herself. But I'd like to explore something where we recognize the student commitment in this commission and that we're able to kind of push that next generation forward.
Yeah, that's a really good
Jennifer?
question. I also had somebody ask whether the commission can write letters of support. So in for example, maybe for a grant application or something like that. And I don't know, David, can you speak to that? Or I wasn't sure if the commission can do that or not.
So I certainly think that, for example, the chair of the commission can recognize somebody's participation and in some kind of formal letter as the chair of the commission. I can think it's possible that even there could be some kind of resolution that would be passed jointly by a vote of the commission that recognizes a member for their participation. So that's something we can look into how we might affect that. But no, it's a really good idea.
I agree. I do like that, Matt. Thank you.
And Commissioner Payne, I just wanted to clarify that the document that we're all looking at to discuss further is called the Collaboration Compact.
Correct. That is what I understand. Is that what you named it, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep,
thanks. I
that
thought you
is
said
correct.
onboarding something or other. I just wanted to be sure.
Well, that's the collaboration. It was discussed during our onboarding
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
sessions. Is why I used incorrect terminology, perhaps.
No, it's
but
okay. I
we
just
are
wanted
talking about the same
to be
document.
clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything else, Teresa?
I
go ahead.
have a clarifying question. Jennifer, thank you for sending out the term limits. Some of us, like I'm at large, my 1 year is up. I mean, I don't quite understand how we're kind of moving forward here.
So thank you for bringing that up. And again, I'm sorry that it took us so long to get that out to you. And I know it's a bit challenging because we had to stagger a lot of them. So we wanted to make sure that every year or every couple years, everybody wasn't up for reappointment. But I can find the exact date, but because, I mean, we established the commission last March, but we took information to council and they actually moved kind of the start date for the commission members to October. I don't remember which exact date it was in October. So your position doesn't come up until October of this year.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer, can you confirm the date that you sent that letter out with the term limits for the date that was sent out?
I believe that was Friday that I sent that.
April 30th, 5:10 p.m.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
everybody got it then? If not, let me know, and then I will follow up with the exact date that council approved for what the appointment would be in October.
If I received it, I might have accidentally deleted it. If you could send it back to me again, that would be terrific.
Okay.
I'm looking for the email from the city about the email setup.
Yeah, that got sent. So I get included on those. So that did get sent to you. So have you checked your spam folder or junk or whatever it might be, trash? Other, depends on what you're using for your.
Who would have sent that to me?
It comes through.
Doesn't it come through the help desk, the IT
Yeah,
help
it comes
desk?
through. Yeah. Yeah, she sent that last Friday.
Last Friday, so that would have been on the 30th?
Or actually it was Thursday. So it was the 29th at about 7 in the morning. So yeah, it comes from the help desk -city. And it gives you your email address and your username. And then you're supposed to get a second email follow-up for your setup.
I don't have it. I'm looking in my spam folder and there's nothing in here from the 29th.
Okay. Well, let me ask them if there's a way that maybe we could set you up with, like, if there's a way that I can help with that.
Just have them call me.
Yeah, like a temporary password or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
Okay.
What is that you're looking for there? I apologize, I missed that.
The new email invite.
It's setting up access to the city email system.
Gotcha. Yep.
Last one I got was March 11th.
That's what I was thinking too. That's the last one I had, something back there.
March 11th?
Yes.
Yeah, there's quite some while ago. I got nothing this last week.
Actually, mine's showing 3/3, March 3rd.
Okay, well, we'll get it. I'll work with you, Mario, to get it figured out.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Can. Commissioner.
Well, is there anything else?
Yeah, can I do a little
Sorry.
bit of staff communication?
Please, that was the next thing on my list. So
Oh,
please,
okay.
I was
just
moving right along. Anyone from staff have any communication they would like to share? No, thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead.
So I wanted to let everyone know that we have a new staff support specialist with the city, and she's been participating in this meeting. And I'm really sorry, Julie, how do you pronounce your last name?
Hi, yeah, my last name is pronounced Nishik.
Nishik, okay. So Julie just started, what, about a month ago, maybe now? And hopefully she'll be transitioning over to, so Jan's been so gracious and helping us out with the Transportation and Mobility Commission kind of support specialist role for a little while now. And hopefully Julie will have kind of some time in the next few months to make that transition over to support the TMC. And so I just wanted to welcome her to the TMC and let her introduce herself. She came to us from the Wisconsin Ethics Commission. And so she's got quite a bit of experience, had to make a big move during COVID, which we really appreciate. But from what I hear, you were the superstar candidate for the position. So if you want to introduce yourself, Julie.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, like you said, I'm from Wisconsin, but I have family who live out here, so that's the main reason for the big move out here. Yeah, and I was supporting a similar commission at my last job, so it's something that is right in my wheelhouse. And yeah, I'm really excited to get to know more about you all and the work that you're doing, and yeah, all the important and interesting stuff that's going on here in Vancouver. So I'm really excited to be on board, and yeah, looking forward to getting to be a part of this.
Welcome, Julie. We're glad you're here.
Thanks.
That was a lot of miles you had to take to get here.
Yeah, it was just about 2,000 miles.
Wow.
I've never lived in Wisconsin, but I don't think the weather's nearly as bad here in the winter, so you should be in good shape.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thanks.
And then I also wanted to let you know too that we recently hired a, oh, I should know her title. I think it's like Senior Policy Transportation Advisor. And her name is Catherine Kelly, and she came from the city of Gresham. And so she started, I think a couple weeks ago, well, just before Julie started, so a little over a month ago. And you may see her a little bit. So she is primarily working on the bridge project. And so Rebecca Kennedy has been doing that amount of work with the bridge project picking up again. Rebecca kind of had that on her plate, and we've been trying to get somebody on board to help. And so Catherine's role specifically is the bridge and then regional project coordination. So looking more at working with CTRAN on some of their BRT projects, and then WashDOT on some of the more regional projects. But really, the bridge is going to take up a lot of her time. And so you may see her name around. I just wanted to let you know and kind of introduce her. She's not on the call tonight, but just if you see her name, and then she might be coming, making some presentations to the group as the bridge project rapidly, it seems like, moves forward. So they're really picking up pace on that project. So I just wanted to let you know that we had hired her, and then we're in the process also of hiring an associate planner. And so that position's been unfilled for about a year to kind of help the team out. So we're hoping to get somebody in that position soon. And then we also have a new public works director that started this week. And we're excited to have her on board. So she comes from the Port of Portland, but has extensive experience working for different agencies, public and private, mainly on the Portland metro region area. And so she started this week. So we're thrilled to have her. And oh my gosh, Anna, I know her first name's Jennifer, but I can't remember her last name. I should know this.
Williamson.
Williamson.
Williamson. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. So just kind of an FYI and heads up on that change. So a lot of new faces to the city as it relates to transportation. So we're really excited to have everybody coming on board. And then I wanted to give you a heads up about the June meeting. So we have a workshop, or we've been trying to schedule a workshop with City Council to talk to them about the TSP. It's been about a year since we've been in front of them to share kind of information about the transportation system plan, and with kind of the hiccups that we had with COVID and kind of the delays that we had on the project, we wanted to come back to them. And so we are currently scheduled to go to them on June 14th. So there's a workshop that day, and I'll tell you what time that starts. I believe it's at 4. So that starts at 4:30. So the workshop with City Council is 4:30 to 6 on June 14th, and that's what we're scheduled for right now. And kind of the key things that we'll be taking to City Council is the equity analysis that Nelson Nygaard's been working on, and that Chris shared a little bit about tonight, and that I know you've talked a little bit about with them at the previous meeting, and then also the collision dashboard. And so for your June meeting, we wanted to have you or give you the opportunity to see that information before we go to council. And so that's what we're really going to be focusing on at the June meeting is Nelson Nygaard's going to be coming back. They're going to be talking more in depth about the vulnerability analysis that we've shared just a little bit about. So kind of give you an overview of how that was developed and kind of the results of that. And then also the collision dashboard that we've been developing as part of the project. And then there'll also be an item on the agenda. So Title 11 is where kind of a lot of the transportation code sits, our street standards, and Public Works is making some changes or modifications to that code. And so I believe Ryan Laposa is going to be coming to the meeting in June to present information on that as well. So another full agenda, but I think some really good topics that'll be coming up for the group. And we do plan on having meetings through the summer, but let me know, because I know some commissions and committees and boards maybe like to take July or August off. I mean, we do have work planned through the summer, but I mean, that's something maybe we can talk about if people are going on vacation. Well, I should say, I guess in normal years, that would maybe be the case, but maybe more people are getting out. There's more vaccinations. People are getting vaccinated. So, email me or let me know if that's a concern. But I just wanted to give you those kind of updates on where we're at, just staff and project-wise and meeting-wise.
Thank you, Jennifer, for those updates. I did have one question. We had a retreat or something I thought scheduled. Has that been rescheduled, or what's the status on that? I apologize for not being more current on that.
Oh, no, that's okay. So we were supposed to have a retreat in April, but we just hadn't so that retreat was initially set to kind of get a few more meetings kind of under our belt and see how things are going, and talk about process, and then maybe some goal, kind of continued goals for the commission. But since we didn't get as far along in terms of meetings as we had wanted, we'll probably push that out until the fall, unless we see a need to do that sooner. But that's kind of the plan right now, is to have the meetings over the summer and then kind of touch base in the fall. And then we can talk too about work plan for 2022 as well. And Kevin has offered to come back and facilitate that. And then also with some of the upcoming meetings that we're going to be having regarding a little bit more challenging projects, like project on 112th and 4th Plane, he'll probably come back and help facilitate those discussions with the group as well.
Awesome. Is anyone else on staff have anything that they'd like to add? Any other communication?
I'll just add quickly, please feel free to email me if you want me to make a connection between NTSA and a neighborhood association. My email is anna.dearman, DEARMAN @cityofvancouver.us. I think you all probably have it, but just in case.
Thank you. The one other thing that I wanted to confirm or qualify that was mentioned earlier was the designated standards for the roads. Jennifer, you mentioned that the arterials, residentials, that was found under Title 11, is that correct?
It is. It's a little convoluted to kind of read through Title 11. So we have actually documents that show the cross sections and kind of the different designs. So I can send out a link to where those are at. And then I can send you the text where the VMC code is too, if you really want to get into the weeds. So the code will say, this road, this arterial needs to be like 70 feet wide. And so it'll just kind of stipulate that. And then the design standards or details that we have actually show like what that would be. So it's 2 lanes and bike lanes and 5-foot sidewalks. And so it kind of better articulates what that actually would look like as it's built.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The last thing that I have personally, and I apologize, I wasn't at the last meeting. Did we vote on absences, or I think we had determined that earlier that it was just going to be taken into record at the roll call? Is that correct? Does anybody have any comments to that?
I think my recollection was that we were going to wait to the end to, kind of do the excused or unexcused, because, we all seem to struggle getting hooked up to Zoom and all that kind of thing.
That was
Yeah, I
me.
couldn't. Go ahead, Mario.
Yeah, that was me today.
I don't recall, David, maybe you can help me out. I don't recall if we had determined to vote that in or if that was necessary to vote in. I think we had just said taking a roll call and leaving it on the minutes where it's going to be sufficient. Or did we need to vote on that?
No, Chair, I think we decided that having it on the minutes would be sufficient. If there gets to be a situation where there's some kind of problem that you would need to address as a body, then we could discuss that. But I don't think we need to worry about that with this current makeup.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you. I think that I was in agreement with that, and that was my understanding as well. So if no one has anything further, I would say that we are pretty much ready for adjournment.
Can I add one more thing? So
please.
I know, David, you and I had talked via email probably a month ago about a question came up from a commission member about kind of their role and representation in the community. So if they were, say, talking with somebody in the community, they could say, I'm, a representative member of the Transportation and Mobility Commission, but not say that they're representing the view of the whole commission. I didn't know if you could, probably better articulate that, but clarify for commission members as they're out in the community talking to other groups and other people how to represent themselves.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
It's only when I start to talk or I'm listening to something, he seems more interested in what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so certainly, when you are interacting with people about some of these matters that come before you, it's good to make sure that people know that you're part of the commission, and part of the goal is to have some visibility with this. And it's fine if you're participating in like a neighborhood board or some other meeting and you're at, and you can express a concern as a member of the TMC or in your private capacity. Just make sure that you're not going to represent that you are talking for the entire commission unless, and if there is a desire for this, I can foresee a possibility, if the commission wants to send 1 or 2 delegates to a certain meeting that's coming up, a few months in advance, there's going to be a bigger meeting that you want a certain message conveyed to this, whatever the body may be. You can talk about that in advance at a meeting and delegate somebody to go there to whatever agency that might be and present a point of view on behalf of the commission. But generally speaking, otherwise identify yourself, as a member, and just make sure you distinguish that you're not speaking for the whole body at a neighborhood board meeting. I just use that for an example, but you could say, hey, I'm a member of the Transportation Mobility Commission. I have concerns. We talk about these kinds of things generally. I'm just speaking as an individual member right now, not for the entire body. If that helps clarify for people, just to make that distinction.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will be on that transportation committee as a representative of our neighborhood association. So that is very direct, valuable information for me. Thank you. The one last thing that I did want to ask was, do we need to bring it up and vote on doing some type of recognition for the student? Is that something that we should start a motion on to address? Should we put it together. David, I'm looking to you for some, guidance here. Is that something that we should do as a body, or something I can do, that we need to take a vote that I could do to put together a draft that we can incorporate?
Well, Chair, thanks for that. I think, I'll talk with staff and offline and perhaps discuss that idea a little bit more. If somebody asked you for something in your capacity as chair of the commission, you certainly feel, you're free to write a recommendation or have some other kind of recognition. Just as chair of the commission, you could do that. But anything that on behalf of the body, there are other ways that, I think I mentioned earlier, some kind of resolution that bodies can sometimes pass to recognize a certain member for something specific. And, it could be for recognition of service. And if that's for student members, that we talk about an appropriate time to do that too. Maybe if it's fall time, if if there's a member who's looking to apply to colleges or use that or would benefit from that in some way. But I'll talk to staff about that offline, and we can sort of bring something to you, perhaps the next meeting, to sort of flesh this idea out a little bit further.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone have any parting words of wisdom for us today?
No.
Well, I will give everyone back 35 minutes of their agenda for the evening. I appreciate everybody's time and cooperation, and we'll consider this meeting adjourned. Next meeting is Tuesday, June 1st, correct? 4 p.m. We will look forward to seeing you all then.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, everybody.